Sermon for Sunday the 19th of April 2020. Sometimes in life there are things that stand right in front of us and seem impossible for us to surpass. They face right in our eyes and test our faith, our belief, our reasoning, our resolve, and much more. These things can feed our anxieties. They can place us in a position of doubt. Our trust in finding the way out is often diminished. We become skeptical of everything and everyone. Today in our readings, we have two very well-known accounts of people who were challenged in different ways. Both doubted who stood before them and feared what it might mean and the next steps they would have to take. We will start with the Old Testament story. It would seem as old as time. The Israelites have left Egypt and are fleeing for their lives from Pharaoh, who, surprise, surprise, has now changed his mind about letting them go. He is so angry at the loss of his own son that he will slaughter everyone that gets in his way. This is where the first doubts enter the minds of the Israelites. Moses, why have you done this to us? A life of slavery must have been better than what they were now facing, certain death. Worse is they have an army behind them, and they had the Red Sea before them. This reminds me of the stories I've heard and seen of Dunkirk. But here, there are no little ships to rescue them, just simply a belief in God. How can God get them out of this mess? Moses simply replies, "Don't be afraid." I think they were very brave words because as they were all doubting God's ability to save them, Moses had to demonstrate a faith that would literally move mountains. Well, in this case, move the sea in such a way that it would be possible for the Israelites to cross. What the people lacked, Moses made up for 1,000 times over. He raised his staff, and the waters divided. Did he doubt for 1 minute that they wouldn't? I don't think so. He knew and he trusted God that if he had brought them this far, he would take them to the land he had promised them. We, at the point of a worldwide crisis at the moment, are confident, or are we confident, that God will bring us out on the other side? Are we? Or are you questioning God as we all face an invisible enemy? Does it all seem unsurpassable? We are locked in and with nowhere to go. When Moses faced those odds, he fell on his knees and spoke with God. If we want to see God at work, then the church, that's the people, you and me, not the empty buildings we have left behind at present, need to fall upon our knees and be in communion with God. We need to put aside our doubts and trust in him. We need faith like Moses, Jesus said. Did he not? With faith as small as a mustard seed, we can move mountains. Imagine then what we could and can do as the whole body of Christ. We can't rely on others to do for us. God is calling his people. It is you and me. Moses demonstrated his faith, but in the end, so did the Israelites. They didn't know what lay on the other side of the sea. No one apart from Moses had been there before. They didn't know if the walls of the sea to their right and to their left would remain balanced to see them through. They didn't know if the army chasing them would simply ride through with them and destroy them on the other side. It took faith to dispel their fear. Now we go to the New Testament and another very familiar story. Two accounts of Jesus' first appearance to disciples after his resurrection. Here in this room, hidden away in Jerusalem, the disciples are living in fear for their lives. They are surrounded by both the Jewish authorities and the religious leaders and the Roman guard that are all looking for them. Perhaps some of them were thinking they should have got out of Jerusalem earlier. After all, they hadn't expected Jesus' body would have gone missing after his burial. But apparently it had. The women had told them this random story about him rising. None of it made any sense. That was until suddenly, standing in their midst, was Jesus himself. Seeing their fear, his first words were, "Peace be with you." He then revealed his wounds because he knew they all had doubts. After all, who wouldn't? They then believed what they were witnessing and couldn't stop talking about it for a whole week. Well, all but one of them, because Thomas wasn't there when this all happened. It wasn't good enough for Thomas to believe the men and the women he had lived with for the past 3 years. He doubted what they said. Should they be surprised after all? Because they didn't believe the women at first, did they? Any of them. Thomas gets his chance a week later. Still living in fear in that room in Jerusalem, Jesus appears again as he did before. The same routine is demonstrated. Jesus reveals his wounds and gets Thomas to feel that he is real and not a ghost. Thomas believes. Thomas gets bad press for being a doubter. The truth was, they all were. And the truth is, we all have been doubters as well. And from time to time, we still doubt God's ability to act in our lives. And when he does, we are often surprised by it. It's often when our backs are up against the wall and we have nowhere to go that we doubt the most. Yet these are often the times when we will see the hand of God at work if we reach out and touch it, if we open our eyes. We need to experience this for ourselves. It is okay hearing it from others, but like Thomas, sometimes we need to see and feel for ourselves. Moses trusted God. He knew he would deliver. For a while, the people didn't believe it, but with their own eyes, they witnessed it, lived it, experienced it, and went on to tell generation after generation about it. Thomas is recorded as taking the good news of Jesus into India. His life was changed forever that day. As God's people, we need to first hear the words of entry in both these stories. Do not be afraid. Peace be with you. When we stand in the presence of God like that, we set aside our doubts and we live by faith. And in that faith, we become the witnessing action that others need to see and experience. It is as if Jesus is, which he is, in the room. These times are when we can be fearful. There are many times to be fearful. Perhaps you're fearful now. But let's learn to put our trust in Jesus, to set aside the doubts, to be strong and to demonstrate the power of God in these times, to hold us all together.